was classified as was not outlawed. Okay, it was not outlawed in Leviticus.
So what do you think she is? What was what? Because I've heard you talk about this before, but
So
it's
weird,
interesting.
man.
Yeah. So you think she was like maybe of a different species, maybe, or something?
Or the species she was in contact was different. This opens up a whole other can of worms, man. It's like, well, what are we doing? So okay, so she was called a Baala Uv, which means a mistress of the image of the dead. Then we have to go into, okay, well, was that Samuel or was that a familiar spirit? People don't understand what a familiar spirit is, first of all. They think, they think it's that the familiar spirit is something that originated in the Middle Ages. And no. Okay, necromancy, specifically in the Old Testament, the familiar spirit, according to their worldview, was a spirit that was still familiar with this world. Right? Their idea was that when you die, you lose memory of this world, you gain memory of the next. And so the idea was to conjure up a familiar spirit. Why? Because this familiarity is predicated on how much he remembers and still remembers of this world. And for references to Whitney Davies, Jewish was the afterlife, and not because that used Jewish, but because they actually go into the Old Testament a little bit deeper than most scholarship. My point, though, is they didn't have a word for her, guys. Not even just that, but that particular passage explicitly details how Saul killed all the righteous. Why? Because what they're doing is, at least in Hebrew, is they killed all of them, left one alive. Why? Because it's possible. That's something we cannot approximate. We don't know what she is. She's a mistress of the image of the dead. So then she conjures up, or not even conjures, she sees, and not a familiar spirit, an Elohim in the Hebrew, coming out of the earth. What is that? I grew up in oneness Pentecostalism. This conversation itself would never have happened because, again, they would have just chalked it up to rebellion or just something, nefarious. But we don't really have a good concept of what an Elohim is either. Because, right, that's not a resurrected entity.
Right. And whatever it was to her, it was a shock too. So it wasn't something she was commonly seeing.
I can tell you why, and this gets back again into ancient necromancy. So the idea was that if the entity manifests, it's coming out of that if the entity came out head first, right, that you were in the presence of royalty, and that's what it was. And then if it came out feet first, that it was just, okay, you're in the presence of the common man. And so what happened was he came out head first, and she realized there's a man in a cloak right there who just asked me to conjure or to see him, right? And then she sees what's happening, goes back to the king and says, "You've deceived me. You've made me do this thing, and now I'm in trouble." But that conversation has to be had. And for some reason, people, specifically within this framework, they say, okay, well, that conversation's been had and all these scholars agree. Name the scholars, because they don't all agree, right? It's a deep conversation, but it just goes to show you that, we just don't know. That's an unquantifiable definition. What is that? We don't know. Even the sons of God in Genesis 6, people act like the sons of God were the same sons of God in Job. The problem is that original sons of God in Genesis 6 is another axiom. It's another, it's sons of God are mentioned later on, but the way they were mentioned in that passage, never mentioned again. And it puts us, even those who are theological or attempt to be like myself, puts us in a predicament because it's like, well, what do we really know? What do we really know? And even within exorcisms, right, it's forms and modes. Well, okay, because long before Pan existed as an entity, we had what's called the open vessel law. It's the priesthood. You go into a house, and that house has a corpse in it. The house itself is defiled by corpse pollution. Not just that, but within the open vessel law, the family has to go throughout the house themselves and take all the vessels, that's why it's a little vessel, that have all the perishables in it, and they take a lid and put it on top of the jar. They're trying to preserve that which is precious to them. So that open vessel that preserves the food that can be defiled is a metaphor for us, because we can be that open vessel that can be defiled by corpse pollution. And so then, this is in Numbers 29 and 19, that's all of a sudden, that's when you have the exorcistic rite and the emergence of holy water comes out. Long before the Vatican was established, long before it existed, long before we were told what the exorcistic rite was designed for. It was designed for corpse pollution. Now, what kind of a corpse is horns and hooves? And so, when we're looking at it, again, narratives about history. One is the Repayumai, which are the disembodied that were worshipped by virtue of death cults. And they were liminal beings. I have pictures of ritual boys and pirates from my books. They're given offerings, right? And they want offerings. And one incantation was designed to give an offering to an entity because they were afraid the same entity that would bless them after the offering would come back and haunt them as a shadow person if the offering was never given. That's when phenomenology began to compartmentalize itself. Well, that's a shadow person. This is something else. No, it's not. In the ancient mind, many of these were the same. They were just the different mechanisms. My point being, though, is that was reconstituted as the Rephaim in Hebrew thought. And so then, you have the first, second typical literature where now you have these scholars and writers who are experiencing the same thing their ancestors did, other neighboring cultures did. But it's now being repackaged as, no, it's not the disembodied dead, it's the disembodied dead Nephilim offspring. See it again, it's there. This is why in the Pirkei Avot, which is the traditions of the elders, you have Elder Eleazar, who he's talking and he's referring back to Rephaim. He's saying, he's like, I don't see it. He's like, it appears that what we're trying to articulate is the existence of post-biological consciousness somewhere. Even if it exists, right, after it's a Nephilim offspring, but still there's something there. In whatever that consciousness is, and within that liminal state, can it procreate? If it cannot procreate, then we have an issue. Because either those same angels that fell on January 6th by procreating are still procreating, because incubi still exist, or there's yet another species that we've yet to even understand. And whatever that is, has been documented as Pan and as fallen angel and it's not. It's just something completely different that we haven't really understood. So, drawing from these ancient traditions, where are we at today? And that's really where I'm at.
Yeah, there's a lot there, because even if you study the Bible and you go through, there's so many different even entities suggested in the Bible alone.
Yeah.
You have the satyrs, you have the cockatrice, you have demons, you have fallen angels, you have watchers, you have so many different kinds of entities and none of them tell you the function of all of them. You don't know the function of all of them. Like God says, who will be a lion spirit in the mouth of this king or whatever. They all have different functions and ideas. And so, I think you're right in not knowing, you said that they present themselves, but they all have a function. In your research, what is the primary function that these beings have? Is it to procreate or is it something else?
I think that they're operating with a species of practitioners on the earth today. And they're self-replicating through them. Again, I don't know if I've covered this, but see when Davey's working that I move. The OB is a borrowed word from the Egyptian Ava or Uva. And their definition of the Uv is revenant, or somebody that returns. Somebody left, or, and then they returned. And you have it again in with Davies' work, where you have the beginning of hybridism in my framework, where even dealing with the witch of Endor, you have the Uv. Now, the Uv, according to Whitney Davies, had 3 definitions. Now, there's also a paper that I would recommend everybody. It's called The Dead and Their Images in Antiquity, where the Uv, according to the necromancer, had 3 definitions. Number one is a device that they would implant into the mouth, and it would enhance and amplify the chirping and the muttering, the language, if you will, of the quote-unquote dead, right?
The opening of the mouth ritual, I read about that in the Egyptian. Yeah.
There we go, underneath the tongue. This is again represented in ancient necromancy, where it's called head magic. It was written in the book of Jasher as well, where the practitioner, and this is dark stuff, guys, they would take a corpse and they would write the name of the unclean spirit on the piece of metal and plant that underneath the tongue, and that unclean spirit merging with metal, placed into new matter by implantation. I thought that was ufology. No, that originated in antiquity through necromancy, which is, by the way, why necromancers are now using necromancy to contact the child. The same mechanism. My point, though, is that was what they were doing. So that was the definition. It's one thing that enhances the communication, the voice. The second definition of the Ov was that it is the material image of the entity possessing. It's the avatar, right? It's the statue, if you will, but and in demonology, we call that a social skin, right? It's not, I got a body now. And the third definition is that it was the possessing entity itself. So if you were Ov, or Avant, you are someone that is returning through and into something. And that something would have to facilitate amplification. It would have to be something you would possess as your social skin, and then it would actually be defined by you. Now you're in it. So you take all of those horizontally, and then you collapse them into one, and you have hybridism. You have someone who's returning through a fetus, who is the amplification. It's the material image of the entity possessing it. I think that's what we're dealing with right on the earth, because it's that fetus that grows up into an adult that can replicate. It's replicating the Uv. That entity within it will now possess the fetus. It's right, creating through the womb. So it replicates.
One question I have is that just pops in my mind is what, like, okay, these people that are maybe hybrids, we haven't, obviously there's no genetically testing, but obviously they've given themselves over as like wizards or some sort to necromancers to be able to be inhabited or whatever. But what are the symbols? Like, how can you, like, if you were to point to a group of people, can you do that, or is that something that is
not
impossible?
Yet. Okay. Not yet. There's 2 data points that I would refer to. Again, this is why Thomas Aquinas had such, right? We already covered that, right? Well, it's disembodied. It's like, okay, but why is it that, number one, they're still replicating? If they only fell in Genesis 6, we got a problem, because then we have to have a second fall. And so the logic fails because the data set isn't lying. There's something wrong with that particular model. So
a lot of Bible scholars do say, like such as L.A. Marzulli and people like that, that the Genesis 6 scenario is looped to happen again around this time. So some Bible scholars do allow for that. I don't know if that's...
Well, yeah, I mean, eschatologically speaking, the problem is we've had that ever since 16th century Middle Ages, not just in 2026 or whenever, their research began. It's like, okay, what do I do with that? So, and I respect them, by the way. I don't know, man. I think that, again, what it appears to be is that, okay, let me digress. Your question. What are they? Where are they? I would say that these are the most hidden. These are not, I mean, not just that, but there would, you know, I mean, I don't even know if they would be perfectly possessed. Maybe, I don't know. I would think.
The invisible college, maybe. These are the people they can meet in spirit. They don't have to be in a lodge. They can,
Yeah, absolutely. And occultists, initiates of the highest order. What do you mean that they don't tell me an order? And I've only captured some of their sigils in my work, some. But of the highest order, something that transcends all esoteric traditions. Now, those traditions may have seeds or inspirations of this leading mystery school, but they are the pre-initiates. They're initiates, but they preceded the initiates that we know of. And I know that, I mean, I go in different cases, but my point is that what Sinistra was trying to articulate to the best of his ability, and still he was groping in the darkness, is whatever they are, that it wasn't just